In the underworld of Chicago, silence is the only currency that matters. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't look the devil in the eye. And you absolutely never interrupt Beryl Russo. But on a rainy Tuesday at the Gilded Lily, the silence was shattered, not by a gunshot, but by a scream, a baby's scream, a child that the city's most ruthless capo couldn't control. Men reached for their guns, the tension was thick enough to choke on, and then she stepped forward. A waitress nobody knew, a girl who should have been running for her life. Instead, she walked right up to the monster, took the screaming child from his arms, and whispered 3 words that would unravel a conspiracy, expose a murder, and threaten to burn the entire city to the ground. She said, "He's just scared." But the truth, she was the only one who knew why. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Inside the Gilded Lily, the city's most exclusive supper club, the atmosphere was usually a hushed symphony of clinking crystal and hushed deal-making. But tonight, the air was vibrating with a sound more piercing than a siren. A baby was screaming. It wasn't a fuss, it wasn't a whimper. It was a guttural, terrifying shriek of pure panic that had been going on for 20 minutes straight. At the center table, the eye of the storm, sat Beryl Russo. At 32, Beryl was the don of the Russo crime family, a man who had dismantled the Mexican cartel's hold on the port in less than a week. He was terrifyingly handsome, in a way that suggested violence. Sharp jaw, eyes the color of burnt espresso, and a bespoke suit that cost more than most people's cars. But right now he looked like a man on the edge of a breakdown. He held the infant awkwardly, like it was a bomb about to detonate. His knuckles were white. "Silas!" Beryl growled, his voice barely audible over the wailing. "Do something!" Silas Thorne, his underboss, a man with a scar running through his left eyebrow and a soul blacker than oil, shifted uncomfortably. "Boss, I can make a call. Get a nanny. Get a doctor." "But here? Now?" "I don't want a call," Beryl roared, causing 3 waiters to drop their trays. The baby, little Leo, only screamed louder, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "I want him to stop. He's been doing this for 3 days since the funeral." The mention of the funeral sucked the oxygen out of the room. Beryl's wife, Christina, had died in a car explosion a week ago. An accident, the police said. A hit, Beryl knew. He was left with a 6-month-old son who seemed to sense the hole in the world where his mother used to be. "Maybe he's hungry," Silas suggested uselessly. "He refused the bottle. He refused the pacifier. If he doesn't stop, I'm going to put a bullet in the ceiling," Beryl hissed, his eyes darting around the restaurant. Patrons were staring. He hated being stared at. It made him feel weak, and Beryl Russo was never weak. In the shadows of the service station, a new waitress adjusted her apron. Her name tag read Nora, but her hands were shaking for a reason that had nothing to do with the heavy trays. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and glasses that were slightly too big for her face, designed to hide her features. She watched the baby. She watched the way Beryl held him, stiff, rigid, radiating stress. The baby wasn't just colicky. He was feeding off his father's aggression. "Don't do it, Nora," the floor manager, a sweaty man named Gary, whispered. "You stay away from that table. That's the Russo table. You breathe wrong, you disappear." "The baby can't breathe, Gary," Nora whispered back, her voice raspy. "Look at him. He's hyperventilating." Not our problem. It became their problem when Beryl slammed his fist on the table, the sound cracking like a gunshot. "Is there no one in this incompetent city who can help me?" The restaurant went deathly silent, save for Leo's gasping screams. Nora didn't think. Instinct, a buried, ancient thing inside her, took over. She walked past Gary, past the terrified sommelier, and approached the table. Silas stood up instantly, his hand moving to the bulge inside his jacket. "Back up, sweetheart." Beryl looked up. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. "What do you want?" Nora didn't look at Beryl. She looked at Leo. "He's not hungry," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "And he's not sick. He's terrified. And who are you?" Beryl spat. "A pediatrician waiting tables? I'm someone who knows that holding him like a shield is making it worse," Nora said. She extended her arms. It was the most dangerous thing she had ever done. "Give him to me." "Boss, don't," Silas warned. Beryl looked at the screaming bundle, then at the waitress. He saw the cheap uniform, the scuffed shoes, the fear in her eyes, but also a strange resolve. He was exhausted. He was desperate. He shoved the baby into her arms. "If you drop him, you die." Nora took the weight. She didn't rock him frantically. She didn't hush him loudly. She pulled him tight against her chest, burying his face into the crook of her neck, shielding his eyes from the harsh chandelier lights. She placed one hand on the back of his head and the other firmly on his lower back. She leaned down, her lips brushing the baby's ear, and whispered a rhythm, not a song. A specific low-frequency hum. "Shh, it's okay. The shadows are gone. You're safe in the light. Shh." It was instantaneous. Leo gasped, a wet, shuddering intake of air. His little fists, which had been beating against the air, unclenched and grabbed the fabric of Nora's uniform. The red flush began to fade from his face. His breathing synchronized with Nora's. In 10 seconds, the screaming stopped. In 30 seconds, Leo was asleep. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. Beryl stared. He looked at the baby, then at Nora's face. For a split second, a flicker of recognition passed through his eyes, not of her face, but of the feeling, the way she held him. It was hauntingly familiar. "How did you do that?" Beryl asked, his voice low. Nora carefully transferred the sleeping infant back to his carrier. She kept her eyes down. He was overstimulated. He needed to feel a heartbeat, not a suit jacket. She tried to step back, to fade into the background, but Beryl's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. His grip was iron. "What's your name?" "Nora," she lied. "Nora Miller." Beryl studied her. He looked at her hands. They were rough, calloused, but her fingernails were clean. He looked at her neck, where a faint, jagged scar disappeared under her collar. "You're lying," Beryl said. It wasn't a question. "I have tables to serve, sir," she stammered, trying to pull away. Beryl stood up. He towered over her. "Silas, get the car." "Sir?" "We're leaving," Beryl said, never breaking eye contact with Nora. "And Nora, you're coming with us." "I can't," she panicked. Her eyes widening. "I have a shift. I have a life." "You had a life," Beryl corrected. "Now you have a job. My son hasn't slept in 3 days. You fixed him in 3 minutes. You're the new nanny." "I didn't apply for the position." Beryl leaned in, and the scent of expensive cologne and gun oil filled her senses. "You don't apply to work for the Russos, Nora. You get chosen. Underscore, 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 underscore. The ride to the Russo estate in Lake Forest was silent and suffocating. Nora sat in the back of the armored SUV, squeezed between the car seat containing the sleeping Leo and the door she couldn't open. The child locks were on. She stared out the tinted window, watching the Chicago skyline dissolve into the darkness of the suburbs. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "He doesn't know," she told herself. "He can't know. If he knew who I really was, I'd be dead already." In the front seat, Beryl was reviewing files on a tablet, but she could feel his eyes on her via the rear-view mirror. "Nora Miller," Beryl said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Born in Ohio. No social media presence. Social security number issued 3 years ago. Previous employment, a diner in Jersey and a cleaner in the Bronx." Nora swallowed hard. "I move around a lot." "People who move around a lot are usually running from something," Beryl said. He turned in his seat to look at her. "Debt? Ex-boyfriend? The law?" "Just bad luck," Nora said softly. "Well, your luck just changed." The car turned through massive iron gates. The Russo estate wasn't a house, it was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Stone walls, cameras on every corner, guards patrolling the perimeter with German shepherds. As the car stopped, Silas opened the door. "Welcome home, sweetheart." His tone was mocking, his eyes cold. Silas didn't like loose ends, and Nora was a very loose end. They entered the grand foyer. It was cold, minimalist, and devoid of warmth. It looked like a museum where no one was allowed to touch anything. "Silas, show her to the nursery. She stays in the adjoining room," Beryl ordered, handing his coat to a butler. "And take her phone. No outside contact until I've fully vetted her." "Wait," Nora protested. "You can't just keep me prisoner. This is kidnapping." Beryl stopped halfway up the marble stairs. He turned, looking down at her. "I'm paying you $10,000 a month. All expenses paid. You take care of Leo. You make sure he doesn't scream. If you want to leave, you can walk out the front gate right now." Nora looked at the door. She could run. She could try to disappear again. But then Leo stirred in his carrier. He let out a small, fearful whimper. Nora looked at the baby who had her sister's eyes, the baby who was the only blood relative she had left in this world. "I'll stay," she whispered. Beryl nodded, satisfied. "Good choice, Silas. Get her settled. If she tries to leave the nursery floor tonight, break her legs." He said it casually, like he was ordering dinner. Nora was led up to the third floor. The nursery was larger than her entire apartment. It was filled with every toy imaginable, but it felt sterile. She placed Leo in the crib, and he immediately settled, sensing her presence. "You got lucky downstairs," Silas said, leaning against the doorframe. He was cleaning his fingernails with a small switchblade. "But I'm watching you. Beryl is grieving. He's vulnerable. He thinks you're some kind of baby whisperer." "But I smell a rat." "I'm just a waitress," Nora said, keeping her back to him. "We'll see." Silas snapped the knife shut. "Lock the door from the inside. We have men in the hall. Don't go wandering." When the door clicked shut, Nora finally let out the breath she'd been holding. She rushed to the window, too high to jump. She walked over to the crib and looked down at Leo. She reached out, tracing the curve of his cheek. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. "I promised I'd protect you, Leo," she whispered to the sleeping infant. "I couldn't save your mother. I couldn't save my sister. But I won't let them turn you into a monster like your father." She reached into her bra and pulled out a small, flat locket. She pried it open. Inside was a picture of two young girls laughing on a beach. One was her, Sophia. The other was Christina, Beryl's late wife. They were twins, fraternal, but the bond was absolute. Beryl didn't know Christina had a sister. The family had been separated in the foster system. Christina had been adopted by a wealthy family, Sophia by the streets. When Christina married the mob boss, she had contacted Sophia secretly, begging her to stay away, saying it was too dangerous. But 2 weeks ago, Christina had sent a letter. "If anything happens to me, you have to find Leo. Don't trust Beryl. Don't trust Silas. There's a traitor in the house." Nora, Sophia, snapped the locket shut and hid it as the doorknob turned. Beryl walked in. He had shed his jacket and tie, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked less like a kingpin and more like a man haunting his own house. "Is he sleeping?" Beryl asked quietly. "Yes." Beryl walked to the crib. He stared at his son with a mixture of love and terror. "He looks like her," he murmured. "Christina." "He has her chin," Nora said without thinking. Beryl's head snapped up. "How would you know what my wife's chin looked like?" Nora froze. "Careful. I saw her picture in the hallway. Downstairs." Beryl studied her face again. The intensity of his gaze made her skin prickle. He took a step closer to her. The air between them charged with a sudden, confusing electricity. "Who are you, really?" Beryl whispered. "Because I ran your prints, Nora Miller. They don't match anyone in the system. You're a ghost. Maybe ghosts are the only ones who can handle this house, she replied, holding his gaze. Beryl stared at her for a long moment, then stepped back. Make sure he sleeps through the night. If he cries, I'm coming back. And if I find out you're working for the Irish or the Triads, I'll kill you with my bare hands. He turned and left. Nora sank onto the floor, her heart pounding. She was inside. She was safe for now. But she had to find out who killed her sister before they found out who she was. 3 weeks passed. The mansion fell into a rhythm. Nora, Sophia, became the center of Leo's world. Under her care, the baby thrived. He gained weight, he smiled, and the screaming fits vanished. Beryl watched it all with a suspicious fascination. He would stand in the doorway of the nursery, watching Nora sing to the child, watching her fold laundry, watching her exist. He started coming home earlier. He stopped bringing his work into the house. One rainy Tuesday, Beryl returned at 2 p.m. He found Nora in the kitchen, arguing with the chef about baby formula ingredients. He can't have the soy-based one. He gets a rash, Nora was insisting. Mr. Russo insists on the imported brand, the chef argued. Mr. Russo doesn't change the diapers. I do, Nora snapped. She turned and bumped right into Beryl's chest. She stumbled back, but he caught her by the elbows to steady her. His hands were warm, large, and surprisingly gentle. She's right, Beryl said to the chef. Do what she says. The chef nodded and scurried away. You have a sharp tongue for a nanny, Beryl said, a hint of amusement in his voice. It was the first time she had seen him almost smile. It transformed his face, taking 10 years off his age. It made him look human. I'm just looking out for Leo, she said, stepping out of his grip. You're good with him. Better than anyone I've ever seen. Even, he trailed off, the pain returning to his eyes. Even Christina struggled with him. She was always so anxious, scared. Maybe she had a reason to be scared, Nora said quietly. Beryl's expression hardened. What does that mean? Nothing. Just being a mother in this life, with all the guards, the guns. It must be terrifying. Beryl poured himself a glass of water. She knew who I was when she married me. I protected her. I gave her everything. You couldn't stop the car bomb, Nora said. The silence crashed into the kitchen. It was a reckless thing to say. Suicidal. Beryl set the glass down. Glass shattered in his hand. Blood dripped onto the marble counter. I am going to find the man who planted that bomb, Beryl said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage, and I am going to peel the skin from his bones. Nora grabbed a towel and reached for his hand. You're bleeding. I don't care. Well, I do. You can't hold the baby with bloody hands. She pulled him to the sink, running his hand under cold water. She picked out the shards of glass and wrapped the wound. Beryl watched her. He was captivated by her efficiency, her lack of fear. He wasn't used to people touching him without trembling. Why do you stay? He asked suddenly. You could have run that first night. You're obviously smart. You're hiding something. Why stay in a house of murderers? Nora finished tying the bandage. She looked up at him. Because Leo is innocent. He deserves a chance. Beryl looked at her lips. For a moment, the air was thick, magnetic. He leaned in, just an inch. Crash. A vase fell in the hallway. Beryl pushed Nora behind him instantly, a gun appearing in his hand from a holster at his back. He moved into the hallway. Silas was there, standing over a broken Ming vase. He looked flustered, a rare look for him. Sorry, boss, Silas said. Clumsy. I was just looking for you. In the hallway. Sneaking up on us? Beryl lowered the gun, but his eyes remained narrow. I got a lead on the bomb maker, Silas said, his eyes flicking briefly to Nora. We need to talk. Private. Beryl nodded. Study. Now. He glanced back at Nora. Go upstairs. Lock the door. Nora went upstairs, but she didn't lock the door. She waited until she heard the heavy oak doors of the study close downstairs. Christina's letter had said, There is a safe in the library, behind the portrait of his father. The combination is our birthday, October 14th, 92. If I die, check the ledger inside. Nora knew the house layout now. She crept down the back stairs. The guards were outside, distracted by a shift change. She made it to the library door. It was cracked open. She could hear voices. "It's a loose end, Dom," Silas was saying. "The nanny. She asks too many questions. She looks at you like she owns the place. We need to get rid of her." "She stays," Beryl's voice was firm. "Leo needs her." "Or maybe you need her," Silas sneered. "You're getting soft, just like when you married Christina. And look where that got us. Watch your mouth, Silas. I'm just saying, distractions get people killed. I say we put a bullet in her and find a deaf mute to raise the kid. If you touch her, Silas, I will kill you." Nora gasped silently. Beryl was protecting her. "Fine," Silas relented. "But the bomb maker, we found him. A freelancer named Marco. He's hiding in a warehouse in the meatpacking district." "We move tonight," Beryl said. "Tonight? Yes, I want answers." Nora heard footsteps approaching the door. She scrambled back, hiding behind a heavy velvet drape just as Silas walked out. He stopped, sniffing the air. He looked right at the drape. Nora held her breath. "Silas, let's go!" Beryl called from inside. Silas grunted and walked away. Nora waited for 10 minutes until the house was quiet. She slipped into the study. She found the portrait. She moved it. The safe was there. She dialed the numbers. October 14th, 92. Click! The safe swung open. Inside, there was no money. There were stacks of papers and a blue ledger. Nora opened the ledger. It wasn't accounting for drugs or guns. It was a log of payoffs. Large sums of money paid to police, judges, and one recurring payment labeled Cleaner. The date of the last payment to Cleaner was the day Christina died. Nora's finger traced the line. Who authorized the payment? There was a signature at the bottom. It wasn't Beryl's. It was a jagged, scrawled initial, St. Silas Thorne. Nora's blood ran cold. Beryl didn't kill her sister. His right-hand man did. And Silas had just lured Beryl to a warehouse tonight to meet a bomb maker. It was a trap. Nora looked at the clock. They had left 10 minutes ago. She had to save him. Not for Beryl, but because if Beryl died, Silas took over. And if Silas took over, Leo was dead. Nora ran to the garage. She didn't have a car, but she saw Beryl's vintage Ducati motorcycle under a tarp. She used to ride with her foster brothers. She grabbed a helmet. She wasn't just a nanny anymore. She was Sophia Rossini, and she was going to war. The warehouse district smelled of brine, diesel, and old blood. The rain had turned into a deluge, hammering against the corrugated metal roof of Warehouse 17. B. Inside it was dim, lit only by a few flickering fluorescent bulbs dangling from chains. Beryl walked in first, his footsteps echoing on the oil-stained concrete. The space was vast, filled with abandoned machinery covered in tarps that looked like crouching beasts in the shadows. "Where is he, Silas?" Beryl asked, his voice low. The hair on the back of his neck was standing up. The air tasted wrong. It tasted metallic. "He said in the back office, boss," Silas said, staying 3 paces behind Beryl. Beryl stopped. There was no back office, just a loading bay door and stacks of empty wooden crates. "You know, Dom," Silas's voice changed. The deference was gone, replaced by a sneering arrogance. "The problem with you lately isn't the grief, it's the weakness. That baby screams and you crumble. A waitress looks at you sideways and you bleed for her." Beryl turned slowly. Silas had stopped walking. In his hand was a matte black Glock, pointed directly at Beryl's chest. "It's sad, really," Silas continued, shaking his head. "You were a king once. Now, you're just a tired father looking for a way out. Christina did this to you, softened you up, made you think you could be a decent man." "You," Beryl breathed, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. It wasn't the Irish. It was you. You killed my wife. I saved the family, Silas yelled, his composure cracking. She was convincing you to liquidate, to go legitimate. The Russo Empire doesn't sell insurance, Beryl. We sell fear. I'm going to kill you slowly, Silas. No, Silas smiled cruelly. You're going to die right here, and then I'm going home to smother that screaming brat of yours. And the nanny? Maybe I'll have some fun with her before I... The roar of an engine cut him off. It wasn't a car. It was high-pitched, screaming, mechanical fury. Before Silas could react, the rolling metal loading door exploded inward. The vintage Ducati, unrecognizable beneath mud and rain, launched over a stack of pallets. The rider, clad in an oversized helmet and a soaking wet trench coat, didn't brake. The bike skidded sideways on the wet concrete, sliding with terrifying speed directly toward Silas. Silas fired wildly. He jumped back, narrowly avoiding being crushed by half a ton of Italian machinery. Nora rolled off the bike as it crashed into a support pillar. She hit the ground hard, winded, her helmet slamming against the concrete. She saw stars. "Get her!" Silas screamed to the shadows. From behind the crates, 4 men emerged. Hired muscle, cheap suits, expensive guns. They weren't family. Beryl didn't hesitate. The moment Silas was distracted, Beryl moved. He was a blur of violence. He disarmed the closest mercenary, breaking the man's wrist with a sickening crunch, and used him as a human shield as the others opened fire. Nora scrambled to her feet, ripping off the helmet. She was unarmed, terrified, but adrenaline surged through her veins. She saw a man taking aim at Beryl's exposed back. She grabbed a heavy rusted chain hanging from a hoist and swung it with all her might. The heavy links smashed into the gunman's face. He went down screaming. Beryl saw her. He saw the nanny, the quiet girl who hummed lullabies, standing amidst a firefight, swinging a steel chain like a Valkyrie. A surge of protective fury, hotter than anything he had ever felt, erupted in his chest. He fought his way toward her, double-tapping 2 mercenaries with the gun he'd acquired. The warehouse echoed with deafening gunshots. Silas, seeing his hired guns dropping, panicked. He fired a parting shot at Beryl, grazing his ribs, and sprinted toward a side exit. "He's getting away!" Nora yelled, pointing. Beryl looked at the retreating figure of his betrayer, then at Nora, who was shivering, covered in grease and rain, a bruise already forming on her cheek. Sirens began to wail in the distance. The police, Silas's backup plan. "Let him run," Beryl growled, grabbing Nora's arm. He winced as the movement pulled at his grazed ribs. "We have to move, now." They ran out into the pouring rain, leaving the carnage behind them. The Ducati was wrecked. "How did you get here?" Beryl demanded, pulling her toward an alleyway. "I stole your bike." Despite the blood soaking his shirt, despite the ruin of his organization, Beryl let out a short, sharp laugh. "You're fired." "Good," she retorted, struggling to keep up with his pace. "I hate this job." They disappeared into the shadows just as the first police cruisers skidded into the warehouse lot. Getting back to the estate was a nightmare of back alleys and stolen cars. Beryl was bleeding badly by the time they breached the perimeter gate. The guards, loyal to Beryl, looked horrified at the sight of their battered Don and the disheveled nanny. "Lock down," Beryl ordered the head of security, his voice weak but commanding. "Nobody in or out. If Silas Thorne shows his face, put his head on a spike at the gate." They made it to the foyer before Beryl collapsed onto the bottom step of the grand staircase. Nora was immediately at his side, ripping open his shirt. The bullet had grazed his left side, tearing flesh over the ribs. It was messy, but not mortal. "I need the medical kit from the master bathroom." "And whiskey, a lot of it," Nora barked at the terrified butler. The man scrambled to obey. For the next hour, Nora worked with a focused intensity. She cleaned the wound, stitched it with hands that only shook when she wasn't working, and bandaged him tight. Beryl sat on the stairs, drinking aged scotch straight from the bottle, watching her. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, hard fury. And questions. When she was finished, she sat back on her heels, wiping sweat and blood from her forehead with the back of her hand. Her glasses were gone, lost in the crash. Her eyes were striking, intense. "Leo is still asleep," she said quietly. I checked the monitor. "Good." Beryl set the bottle down. The silence in the massive house was suffocating. "Now, talk." Nora looked away. "Talk about what?" "You need rest." Beryl reached out and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His grip wasn't violent, but it was inescapable. "Don't play games with me, Nora. Not tonight. You ride like an outlaw. You fight like you grew up on the street. You knew Silas was setting a trap. How?" Nora closed her eyes for a second. The game was up. She was too exhausted to lie anymore. "The safe in the library," she whispered. "The combination was Christina's birthday." Beryl froze. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "How did you know Christina's birthday?" "Because it's my birthday, too." She reached into a damp shirt and pulled out the silver locket. She snapped it open and held it out. The picture of the two identical laughing girls caught the light of the chandelier. Beryl looked at the photo, then at Nora. He really looked at her, past the severe bun, past the shapeless uniform. He saw the structure of the cheekbones, the shape of the eyes. He recoiled as if burned, dropping his hand from her face. "You're the twin," he whispered. "Sophia." "Yes." "You lied to me. You infiltrated my house. You handled my son under false pretenses." His voice rose with every sentence, the betrayal warring with the bizarre relief that he wasn't crazy for seeing his dead wife in the nanny's gestures. "Christina told me to," Sophia said, her voice shaking with emotion. "She sent a letter before she died. She said if anything happened to her, I had to save Leo. She said there was a traitor. I didn't know it was Silas until tonight. I found the ledger in the safe. He paid the bomber." Beryl stood up, wincing. He paced the marble floor like a caged animal. "You should have come to me." "You?" Sophia stood up too, facing him down. "You were the Don. For all I knew, you ordered the hit. You think I trust men like you? Men who solve problems with car bombs and shootouts in warehouses?" "I loved her!" Beryl roared, the sound echoing up to the high ceilings. "I would have burned the world down for her." "Then why is she dead, Beryl? Why did my sister die, terrified in a car you bought her?" Her words hit him harder than Silas's bullet. He stopped pacing. He looked defeated. "You're right," he said hoarsely. "It's my fault. I brought the darkness into her life, and now it's coming for my son." He looked at her, standing there defiantly, her chest heaving. She was stronger than Christina. Christina would have fainted tonight. Sophia had picked up a chain and fought. He crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides. The tension in the room shifted from anger to something thick, heavy, and dangerous. He towered over her. "You saved my life tonight, Sophia," he murmured, saying her real name for the first time. It felt strange on his tongue, heavy. "I did it for Leo, because he needs a father, even a flawed one." Beryl reached out, his hand hovering near her neck, near the scar he had noticed that first night. "You have her eyes, but everything else is different. You're fire. She was water." He leaned in. She didn't pull away. Her breath hitched. The smell of whiskey, blood, and rain on him was overwhelming. His lips brushed hers, tentative, a question asked in the shadow of death. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was a collision of grief and adrenaline, and a strange, terrifying attraction that had been simmering for weeks. She kissed him back, her hands gripping the lapels of his ruined shirt. A loud pounding on the front door shattered the moment. They broke apart, breathing hard. Beryl's eyes instantly cleared, the ruthless capo returning. The head of security rushed into the foyer, looking pale. "Boss, we have a problem." "What is it?" Beryl barked. "It's Detective Russo, no relation. From homicide. He's at the gate with a warrant. Not for the warehouse. For the house." "On what grounds?" Anonymous tip, the guard said, glancing nervously at Sophia. Claiming we're harboring a fugitive involved in the meatpacking district shooting, and they're looking for a woman matching her description. Beryl cursed under his breath. Silas worked fast. He was using the law to finish what his bullets couldn't. Beryl grabbed Sophia's hand. His grip was iron. "You aren't the nanny anymore, Sophia," Beryl said, his eyes dark with promise. "Now you're my partner, and we are going to war." The banging on the front door was rhythmic, authoritative, and terrifying. Beryl didn't panic. He adjusted his cuffs, ignoring the fresh blood seeping through the bandage on his side. He looked at Sophia. "Take Leo. Go to the west wing. There's a panel behind the tapestry in the hallway. It leads to the panic room. It's impenetrable." "Nothing is impenetrable to the man who built the security system," Sophia countered, her voice tight. "Silas knows the codes, Beryl. If I go in there, I'm trapping myself in a steel box." Beryl paused. She was right. He had trusted Silas with his life, his home, and his secrets. That trust was now a weapon pointing at his throat. "The roof," Beryl decided. "The storm is bad, but the helicopter pad has access to the service ladder down the east wall. It's dangerous, but Silas won't expect it. Wait for my signal. If things go south, run. Don't look back." Sophia grabbed Leo from the crib. The baby, sensing the tension, started to fuss. Sophia immediately pressed him to her chest, humming that low, vibrating rhythm against his temple. "Shh, little lion. Silent as a mouse." She didn't look back at Beryl. She couldn't. If she did, she wouldn't leave. She disappeared into the shadows of the upper hallway just as the front doors were breached. Downstairs, Beryl stood in the center of the foyer, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking like he was bored, not bleeding. Detective Evans walked in, followed by 4 uniformed officers. Evans was a thick-necked man with eyes that looked like dead fish. Beryl knew him. He was a man who had lost his pension gambling and found a new sponsor in the underworld. "Mr. Russo," Evans smirked. "Sorry to disturb your evening. We have a report of a domestic disturbance and a fugitive." "I was just having a drink, Detective," Beryl said smoothly. "The only disturbance here is your muddy boots on my Italian marble." "We're looking for a woman," Evans said, stepping closer. He smelled of rain and cheap tobacco. "Involved in a massacre downtown. Witnesses say she fled here." "I have a nanny," Beryl shrugged. "She's asleep. I'd hate to wake the baby." "We'll be the judge of that," Evans signaled his men. "Search the house, every room." "You have a warrant?" "Exigent circumstances," Evans sneered. He leaned in, lowering his voice so only Beryl could hear. "Silas sends his regards, Dom. He said to tell you the transition of power will be painless if you just let us do our job. Give us the girl. We leave you alone." Beryl took a sip of his scotch. "You know, Evans, the problem with betting on a traitor is that they usually betray you too. Is that a threat? It's financial advice." Beryl threw the scotch in Evans' face. The alcohol stung the detective's eyes, blinding him for a split second. Beryl didn't waste it. He drove his knee into Evans' gut, then chopped the back of his neck. The detective crumpled. "Now!" Beryl roared to his own security team, who had been waiting in the wings, hidden in the shadows of the dining room. The foyer erupted into chaos. It wasn't a gunfight. It was hand-to-hand combat. Beryl's loyal guards clashed with the corrupt officers. Beryl didn't stay to watch. He turned and sprinted up the stairs, ignoring the tearing pain in his side. He had bought Sophia time, but not enough. He knew Silas wasn't waiting outside. Silas was already inside. Underscore, 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 underscore. On the roof, the wind was a hurricane. Rain lashed against Sophia's face like needles. She had Leo strapped to her chest inside her coat, shielding him with her body. She moved towards the service ladder, slipping on the wet tiles. Click, The sound of a hammer cocking was audible even over the storm. Sophia froze. She turned slowly. Silas stepped out from behind the chimney stack. He was soaked, his expensive suit ruined, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. He held a silver pistol, Christina's favorite gun. The irony made Sophia sick. "I knew you wouldn't go to the panic room," Silas shouted over the wind. "You're a street rat, Sophia. Rats don't like traps. They like exits." "Let us go, Silas," Sophia screamed back. "You have the business. You have the money. Why do you need to kill a baby?" "Because he's the heir," Silas spat. "As long as that kid breathes, the families will never fully respect me. They'll always see me as the steward, the placeholder. I want the throne." "Nah." He raised the gun, aiming at Sophia's chest. "At Leo." "Christina trusted you," Sophia cried, taking a step back toward the edge of the roof. "She told me you were her friend." "I was," Silas yelled, his hand shaking slightly. "I loved her. But she chose him. She chose the monster. And then she had his spawn. I did her a favor, Sophia. I freed her. You murdered her. And now I'm going to finish the job." Silas tightened his finger on the trigger. Suddenly Leo woke up, and he screamed. It wasn't the whimper from earlier. It was the full-blown, ear-splitting shriek that had haunted the restaurant weeks ago. The sound was piercing, dissonant, and shocking in the close proximity. Silas flinched. The noise grated on him. "Shut that thing up!" In that split second of distraction, Sophia didn't run away. She ran at him. She tackled Silas. It was a suicide move. Silas was twice her size and armed. But Sophia had rage on her side. They crashed onto the wet gravel of the roof. The gun skittered away. Silas punched her, a heavy blow to the jaw that made her vision swim. She clawed at his face, screaming, protecting the baby with one arm while fighting with the other. Silas got the upper hand. He pinned her down, his hands closing around her throat. He was squeezing the life out of her. The baby was screaming between them, a chaotic soundtrack to the murder. Sophia's vision began to tunnel. Dark spots danced in her eyes. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't save him. Bang! Silas's head snapped back. His grip loosened instantly. He slumped to the side, rolling off her. Sophia gasped, sucking in air, coughing violently. She looked up. Beryl stood 10 feet away, chest heaving, smoke rising from the barrel of his gun. He looked like death warmed over, bleeding, bruised, soaking wet. He walked over to Silas's body. He didn't look at it. He kicked the gun away. He dropped to his knees beside Sophia. "Did he hurt Leo?" Beryl asked, his voice breaking. Sophia checked the bundle in her coat. Leo was red-faced, screaming his lungs out, but unharmed. "He's okay," she sobbed. "He's just loud." Beryl pulled them both into his arms. He buried his face in Sophia's neck, shaking uncontrollably. The great Don, the mafia boss, the monster of Chicago. He was weeping in the rain. "It's over," he whispered into her hair. "I got you. I got you." 6 months had passed since the night the rain turned red on the rooftop of the Russo estate. Winter had bled into a tentative spring, and the icy winds off Lake Michigan had been replaced by a breeze that smelled of wet earth and blooming jasmine. The Russo estate, once a fortress of cold stone and colder silences, had undergone a transformation. The heavy velvet drapes that used to block out the sun were pulled back. The nursery, once a sterile room of expensive, neglected toys, was now a chaotic kingdom of colorful blocks and soft blankets. But the biggest change wasn't in the furniture. It was in the man standing at the window of the master study. Beryl Russo adjusted his cufflinks. The scar on his side, a jagged reminder of Silas's betrayal, still ached when it rained. But he welcomed the pain. It grounded him. It reminded him that he was alive. "You're going to wear a hole in the carpet, Dom," a soft voice said from the doorway. Beryl turned. His breath caught in his throat, a reaction he still couldn't control even after half a year. Sophia stood there. She was no longer the terrified waitress hiding behind oversized glasses, nor the desperate aunt in a stolen mechanic's jumpsuit. Tonight, she was the lady of the house. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that clung to her frame, leaving her shoulders bare. Her hair, once pulled back in that severe bun, cascaded in dark waves down her back. But it was her eyes that held him. They were Christina's eyes. Yes, but the haunting ghost was gone. In its place was a fierce, steady warmth that had become Beryl's anchor. "I'm not nervous," Beryl lied, walking over to her. "You are," she teased, reaching out to straighten his tie. Her fingers brushed the pulse point of his neck. "It's just a party, Beryl. You've faced down cartels and FBI raids. You can handle a christening." "It's not the party," Beryl admitted, his voice dropping to a rumble. "It's what it means. Tonight we stop hiding. Tonight the city knows who you are, who we are." Sophia's smile didn't falter. "Let them look. I'm not afraid of them. Not anymore." From down the hall, a happy squeal echoed. It was followed by the sound of a rattle being shaken with enthusiastic violence. "He's awake," Beryl smiled, the tension leaving his shoulders instantly. They walked to the nursery together. Leo was standing up in his crib, holding on to the rails. At 1 year old, he was a sturdy, bright-eyed boy who looked exactly like his father but possessed his mother's curiosity. There was no screaming. There hadn't been a screaming fit since the night Silas died. It was as if the baby knew that the shadow hanging over the house had been lifted. Beryl picked up his son, lifting him high into the air until Leo giggled, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "Ready to meet your kingdom, little lion?" Beryl whispered. Underscore, 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 underscore. The Gilded Lily had been reopened for one night only, the location where it all began. The room was filled with the elite of Chicago, politicians, judges, and the heads of the remaining 4 families. They stood as Beryl entered, a ripple of hushed respect moving through the crowd. They had heard the rumors. They knew about the purge, the retirement of Silas Thorne, and the brutal efficiency with which Beryl had secured his borders. But when they saw Sophia walking beside him, head held high, holding the heir to the Russo Empire, the whispers stopped. This wasn't a mistress. This wasn't a nanny. This was a partner. The ceremony was brief, but solemn. When the priest poured the holy water over Leo's head, the baby didn't cry. He looked out at the sea of faces with a solemn gravity that made the old capos nod in approval. Leonardo Santino Russo. After the formalities, the jazz band began to play. The room relaxed. Champagne flowed. Beryl led Sophia to the edge of the terrace, away from the prying eyes and the smoke of expensive cigars. The city skyline glittered in the distance, a sprawling grid of lights reflecting off the dark water. "You did good in there," Beryl said, leaning against the stone balustrade. Old man Ricci looked like he was about to have a heart attack when you corrected him on the vintage of the wine. Sophia laughed, the sound mingling with the music. "He needed to know I pay attention to the details. Details matter in this family." Beryl watched her, his expression turning serious. He reached into his jacket pocket. "I have something for you. It's not a ring. Not yet. I know we said we'd wait." He pulled out a small, flat box. Sophia took it, her hands trembling slightly. She opened it. Inside wasn't a diamond. It was a simple silver key on a chain. "What is this?" she asked, looking up at him. "It's the key to the safe deposit box at the First National," Beryl said quietly. "Inside are passports, new identities, cash, enough to live anywhere in the world. For you and for Leo." Sophia stared at the key. The metal felt cold against her skin. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because," Beryl said, stepping closer, his hand cupping her cheek, "I never want you to feel trapped again. I never want you to stay because you're scared, or because you have nowhere else to go. I want you to know that the door is always unlocked." He looked deep into her eyes, stripping away his own defenses. "You saved my son from the noise, Sophia. You saved me from the darkness. But I know what I am. I'm a dangerous man living in a dangerous world. If you ever want to leave, if you ever want peace, this key is yours." Sophia looked at the key, then at the man who had burned down the world to keep her safe. She thought about the sister she had lost, and the nephew she had found. She thought about the way Beryl's heart beat against hers in the middle of the night, when the nightmares came for either of them. She closed the box with a sharp snap. She didn't put it around her neck. She handed it back to him. "I don't want it," she said firmly. Beryl blinked, surprised. "Sophia, it's insurance. It's freedom." "I already have my freedom, Beryl," she whispered, stepping into his space, her hands finding the lapels of his jacket. "Freedom isn't running away. Freedom is choosing where you stand. And I'm standing right here." She leaned up, her voice dropping to that familiar, soothing register, the tone that had tamed a screaming baby and a savage king. "Besides," she smiled, a playful light dancing in her eyes, "who else is going to stop you from shooting the chef when the soufflé collapses?" Beryl let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He took the key and tossed it over the balcony. It disappeared into the darkness of the garden below. "Okay," he said, wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him. "Then you stay." "I stay," she promised. "Then I have a different question," Beryl murmured, his lips brushing against her ear. "The nursery. It's big enough for two, don't you think? Leo might need a brother, or a sister. Someone to protect." Sophia blushed, burying her face in his shoulder. "One miracle at a time, boss." "We have time," Beryl said, looking over her head at his son, who was currently charming the wife of a senator across the room. "We have all the time in the world." The music swelled, a slow, soulful number. Beryl began to sway, pulling Sophia into a slow dance under the moonlight. For the first time in his life, Beryl Russo didn't check the exits. He didn't scan the room for threats. He just held the woman he loved, listened to the laughter of his son, and let the silence of a peaceful life wash over him. The screaming was over. The story had just begun. And that is the story of how a single scream changed the fate of the Chicago underworld. It wasn't the guns or the money that saved the Russo legacy. It was a sister's love and a father's redemption. Beryl and Sophia proved that even in the darkest corners of the city, family isn't just about blood. It's about who you bleed for. The Gilded Lily still stands today, and legend has it, if you go there on a rainy Tuesday, you might just see the Don and his lady, sitting in the back booth, enjoying the silence.